I wake at 4 in the morning like I've done for the last 50 years, but now my body takes longer to respond. My joints creak, my back complains, and I have to grip the headboard just to sit up. The house is absolutely silent, the kind of silence that seems to scream in my ears. It's not the peaceful quiet of someone who chose solitude. It's the heavy silence of someone who ended up alone without meaning to. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free, and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. I put my feet on the cold floor and look out my bedroom window. Out there, 5,000 acres of the finest Texas land stretches as far as my tired eyes can see. 2,000 head of cattle graze peacefully, each one worth a small fortune. The farming equipment gleams under the moonlight that hasn't quite disappeared yet. Modern machines that cost what an average family earns in 10 years. In the garage sits my new pickup, bought 3 months ago, still smelling of new leather. In the bank, $15 million sits without purpose. Growing with interest, I don't even bother calculating anymore. But when I walk downstairs and enter the kitchen, there's nobody making coffee. There's no smell of toast or bacon frying. There's no voice wishing me good morning or complaining that I woke up too early again. I make my own coffee, like I've done for decades, and sit in the same chair as always, looking at the other 5 empty chairs around the table. This table that my mother picked out 60 years ago, thinking it would one day be surrounded by grandchildren. This table that never saw a full Christmas dinner, never heard children's laughter fighting over a piece of pie, never hosted conversations about homework or vacation plans. It's just a big, empty table in a big, empty kitchen in a big, empty house. My name is Robert Miller, and I'm 68 years old. I was born on this ranch in 1957, the only child of James and Martha Miller. My father inherited this land from his grandfather, and when I was born, the ranch had about 1,000 acres and a few hundred head of cattle. We weren't rich, but we didn't go without either. My father was a hard man, the kind who didn't waste words or affection. He taught me that real men work, don't complain, don't cry, and certainly don't waste time on foolishness. When I was 7 and cried because I fell off a horse and broke my arm, he looked at me with disappointment and said I needed to be tougher. When I was 12 and wanted to go to a classmate's birthday party, instead of helping him fix the north fence, he gave me a lecture I never forgot about priorities and responsibilities. My mother was different. She tried to bring softness to our home, cooked with love, sang while doing laundry, always had a hug saved for me when my father wasn't looking. She died when I was 15, cancer that spread too fast for the doctors of that time to do anything about. I remember the funeral, standing there next to my father as they lowered the casket. I wanted to cry. My chest hurt like they'd ripped a part of me out, but when I felt the tears coming, I looked at my father. He stood there, dry as Texas soil in summer, his face hard as stone. I wiped my eyes before the first tear could fall and promised myself I'd be strong like him. Today I realize that wasn't strength. It was just a man who never learned to feel, but at the time it seemed like the right thing to do. After my mother died, the ranch got even quieter. It was just me and my father, working from dawn to dusk. He didn't talk about feelings or about her. It was as if she'd never existed, except for the photographs he put in a drawer and never looked at again. I had my own memories of her, but I learned to keep them to myself. I learned that feelings were things that got in the way of work, and work was all that mattered. I finished high school barely because my father needed me on the ranch. While other kids were going to football games and dances, I was mending fences and feeding cattle. While they were planning which colleges to apply to, I was learning which veterinary medicines to use on sick cows. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was learning something more valuable than what they taught in classrooms. I told myself a lot of things back then that I now know were lies I needed to believe. My father died when I was 23. Heart attack, sudden and massive, right there in the south pasture. I found him slumped against a fence post, his face peaceful in a way I'd never seen it in life. I called the ambulance, but I knew he was gone. At his funeral, I stood dry-eyed and silent, just like he'd taught me. People from neighboring ranches came and patted my shoulder and said I was brave, said I was strong, said my father would be proud. I inherited everything, all 1,000 acres, all the cattle, all the equipment, all the debt he'd carefully managed. And I inherited his philosophy too, the one that said work was everything, that success was measured in acres and dollars, that a man didn't need anything else. I was 23 years old and suddenly in charge of everything. Other young men my age were in college, or starting careers in cities, or getting married, or traveling, or doing all the things young people do. I was alone on a ranch with a mortgage and cattle to feed and fences to mend and no idea how to do anything except work. So that's what I did. I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. I learned everything about ranching, about cattle breeding, about land management, about business. I read every agricultural journal I could get my hands on. I went to cattle auctions and studied which bloodlines were worth investing in. I calculated grazing rotations and feed costs and profit margins. And slowly, year by year, the ranch grew. By the time I was 30, I doubled the size of the ranch. 2,000 acres, better cattle, newer equipment. I'd paid off my father's debts and started building my own savings. Neighboring ranchers started asking me for advice. I felt successful. I felt like I was doing exactly what I was supposed to do. Building something, creating a legacy, proving that I was worth something. But I never stopped to ask who I was building it for. I never stopped to think about what a legacy means if there's nobody to leave it to. There were women who were interested in me over the years. I know that now, looking back, though I was oblivious at the time. There was Sarah Jenkins, whose family owned the ranch bordering mine to the east. She was pretty, with red hair and green eyes, and she always found reasons to ride over to my property to borrow tools or ask advice. She'd stay and talk, leaning against the fence, laughing at things I said that weren't even funny. One day when I was 25, she asked if I'd like to come to a barn dance her family was throwing. I said no without even thinking about it. I had work to do. The fences needed mending. The cattle needed moving to fresh pasture. I saw her face fall, saw the hurt in her eyes, but I didn't understand why. She stopped coming by after that. A year later, I heard she'd married a man from Austin and moved away. There was Margaret Sullivan from town, the bank teller who always smiled at me when I came in to make deposits. She was a few years younger than me, dark-haired and soft-spoken, with a gentleness that reminded me a little of my mother. One day when I was 28, she worked up the courage to ask if I'd like to get dinner sometime. I was depositing a check from a cattle sale, feeling good about the numbers, and I barely registered what she was asking. I said something about being too busy with the ranch, thanked her and left. I didn't even see the way her smile disappeared. A few months later, someone else was at her station when I came in. I asked where Margaret was, and they told me she'd gotten engaged and moved to Houston with her fiancé. I remembered her invitation then and felt a moment of something, maybe regret, but I pushed it away. I had work to do. There were others over the years. A woman I met at a cattle auction who gave me her number. A rancher's daughter who invited me to a barbecue. A widow from church who brought me a casserole when she heard I'd been sick with the flu. Every time I found a reason to say no, to keep them at arm's length, to stay focused on what I thought mattered. I told myself I didn't have time for relationships. I told myself the ranch needed me completely. I told myself I'd think about settling down later, once the ranch was more established, once I'd reached the next goal, the next milestone. There was always something more important than connection, than companionship, than love. At least that's what I convinced myself. The years blurred together. My 30s passed in a haze of work. I'd wake before dawn, work until sunset, eat dinner alone, fall into bed exhausted, and do it all again the next day. Weekends meant nothing to me. Holidays were just days when the feed store was closed. I'd see neighbors gathered for 4th of July barbecues, their yards full of kids and friends and laughter, and I'd feel something twist in my chest, but I'd tell myself I was too busy to join them. They'd invite me and I'd decline. After a while, they stopped inviting me. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I preferred it this way. I told myself a lot of lies. By my 40th birthday, I owned 3,000 acres. The bank account was growing nicely. I'd invested in better breeding stock, built new barns, upgraded all my equipment. Other ranchers looked at me with respect, sometimes with envy. I'd made it by any measure of success I'd been taught to value. But that night, on my 40th birthday, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a store-bought cake I'd gotten for myself, and I couldn't bring myself to light the candles. What was the point? There was nobody to sing to me, nobody to make a wish for, nobody to share the cake with. I cut a slice, ate it standing at the sink, and threw the rest away. Then I went to bed at 8 o'clock because there was nothing else to do. My 40s passed much like my 30s, just with more acres and more money. I expanded to 4,000 acres, then 5,000. I installed irrigation systems, rotational grazing programs, the most advanced herd management software. My herd grew to 2,000 head of premium cattle. Every calf brought in top dollar at auction. Agricultural magazines wrote articles about my operation. Young ranchers came to tour my property and learn from my methods. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt empty, though I didn't let myself examine that feeling too closely. Work was easier than introspection. I turned 50 and barely noticed. Just another day of work, another year older, another year alone. My body was starting to show the wear of 3 decades of hard labor. My back hurt most mornings. My knees complained when I climbed into the truck. I needed reading glasses to see the small print on feed labels. I'd look in the mirror and see my father's face looking back at me, harder and more weathered than I remembered. I'd gotten what I'd worked for. I'd become exactly what he'd wanted me to be, and it felt like a hollow victory I didn't know how to name. My 50s were when things started to change, or maybe when I finally let myself notice they needed to change. I was 53 when I went to the doctor for what I thought was indigestion, and found out I had high blood pressure and the beginnings of heart disease. The doctor, a young woman probably half my age, looked at me seriously and asked about my stress levels, my support system, my lifestyle. I told her I ran a ranch, worked hard, didn't have time for stress. She asked if I lived alone. I said yes. She asked if I had family, close friends, anyone I spent time with. I said no. She looked at me with something like pity and said I needed to make changes, that my health required more than just medication, that isolation was as dangerous as high cholesterol. I nodded and promised I'd try, but I didn't. I took the pills she prescribed and went back to work. I was 55 when Tom Henderson, my nearest neighbor, died of a stroke. Tom was 68 and had always seemed invincible, a big, loud man who'd run his ranch for 40 years. We weren't close, but we'd helped each other out over the years, fixed each other's fences, borrowed equipment, waved when we saw each other at the feed store. His funeral was packed with people. His wife sat in the front row, surrounded by their 4 children and 11 grandchildren. The church was full of neighbors, business associates, friends from town, people whose lives Tom had touched. They told stories about him, funny ones and touching ones, stories about his generosity and his terrible jokes and how he'd helped them through hard times. I sat in the back and realized nobody would tell stories like that about me. There'd be nobody sitting in the front row crying. There'd be no children or grandchildren to mourn. I'd have a sparsely attended service with a few business associates who'd come out of obligation, and then I'd be forgotten. The ranch would be sold, divided up, and within a generation nobody would remember I'd existed. That thought terrified me in a way nothing else had. I went home that night and walked through my big empty house and looked at my bank statements and my property deeds and my equipment titles, and I understood with sudden clarity that I'd spent 35 years building a monument to nothing. All of this, every acre, every cow, every dollar, it would vanish like I'd never existed. I'd sacrificed everything that made life worth living for things that had no meaning without someone to share them with. I sat at my kitchen table that night and felt the weight of all those years crushing down on me. And for the first time since my mother's funeral, I cried. I cried for hours, deep racking sobs that came from somewhere I'd kept locked up for decades. I cried for every woman I'd turned away, every invitation I'd declined, every moment of connection I'd refused because I was too busy, too focused, too committed to building an empire for nobody. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding head and the same empty house. The crying hadn't changed anything. The reality was still the same. I was 55 years old, a confirmed bachelor who'd never even kissed a woman, let alone anything more. I was at 55 years old a virgin, which felt simultaneously absurd and tragic. How does a man live 55 years and never experience physical intimacy? How does a man spend 5 decades on Earth and never feel the warmth of someone sleeping next to him, never hold someone close, never know what it's like to be wanted, to be touched, to be loved? The answer was simple and devastating. By choosing work over life, every single day for 35 years. I tried to change. I really did. I started going to church on Sundays, something I'd stopped doing after my mother died. I sat in the back pew and listened to the sermons and tried to feel part of a community. People were friendly enough, shaking my hand and welcoming me back. But decades of isolation couldn't be undone by showing up on Sunday mornings. They had their established friend groups, their families, their lives. I was the strange loner rancher who'd suddenly reappeared after 30 years. Some tried to include me, inviting me to potlucks and study groups, but the relationships felt forced, awkward. I didn't know how to make small talk. I didn't know what to say when people asked about my life. My life was work, had always been work, and that wasn't interesting conversation. I tried online dating, which felt ridiculous at my age, but I didn't know what else to do. I created a profile, posted photos of my ranch, described myself as a successful rancher looking for companionship. The responses were sparse and disappointing. A few scammers, obvious from the first message, a few women looking for financial security who lost interest when they realized I wasn't going to sweep them off to a life of leisure. One woman did seem genuinely interested, a 50-year-old widow from Dallas who said she'd grown up on a farm and missed country life. We exchanged messages for a few weeks, and she seemed kind and honest. We agreed to meet for dinner at a restaurant halfway between us. I drove 2 hours nervous in a way I hadn't been since I was a teenager. I sat at the table waiting for her, wearing my best shirt and boots, and she never showed up. I waited for an hour, texted her, called her, and finally went home, understanding that she'd taken one look at me through the restaurant window and decided she could do better. Maybe she could. Maybe everyone could. I was 57 when I hired Carlos Mendoza to help with the ranch work. My back was getting worse, my knees were shot, and I finally had to admit I couldn't do it all alone anymore. Carlos was 35, had a wife and 3 kids, and needed the work. He was a good worker, reliable and skilled, and having someone else around made the ranch feel slightly less empty. But it also highlighted everything I didn't have. He'd leave at 5 o'clock to go home to his family, to eat dinner with his kids, to help with homework, to watch TV with his wife. I'd stay behind in my empty house, eating dinner alone, watching the news alone, going to bed alone. On Mondays, he'd come in talking about his weekend, about his son's soccer game, or his daughter's school play, or the family barbecue they'd had. I'd listen and feel this aching hollowness in my chest. That's what life was supposed to be like. That's what I'd missed. That's what all the money and land couldn't buy. My 60s arrived and brought with them the undeniable reality of aging. At 60, I needed surgery on my knee, arthroscopic repair of damage from decades of hard use. At 62, I had a minor heart attack that scared me badly enough to finally start taking my doctor's advice more seriously. I changed my diet, started taking walks, tried to reduce my stress. But the core problem remained. I was alone, getting older, getting sicker, and there was nobody who would care when I was gone. At 64, I updated my will. It was a depressing exercise. I had millions to leave, thousands of acres, expensive equipment, livestock worth a fortune, and nobody to give it to. No wife, no children, no grandchildren, no siblings or close family. I ended up leaving most of it to charity, which felt both noble and empty. Some hospital would get a new wing with my name on it, and that would be my legacy. A building full of strangers. I'm 68 now, and I'm writing this sitting at my kitchen table at 4 in the morning because I can't sleep anymore. The doctor found cancer 6 months ago, prostate cancer that's already spread. They gave me treatment options, radiation and surgery and medications, but I'm tired. I'm so tired of fighting, tired of being alone, tired of this empty house and empty life. I'm going to die, maybe in a year, maybe in 5, but probably sooner rather than later. And I'm going to die alone in this house that was supposed to be full of love and family and life. The regret is overwhelming some mornings. It sits on my chest like a physical weight, makes it hard to breathe. I think about Sarah Jenkins and her red hair and green eyes, and I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd said yes to that barn dance. Would we have fallen in love? Would we have married and filled this house with children? Would I be sitting here at 68 with grandkids who called me Papa and climbed on my lap and made me feel like my life had meant something beyond acreage and cattle? I think about Margaret Sullivan and her soft voice and gentle smile, and I wonder if she could have taught me how to be human, how to feel, how to love. I wonder about all the women whose names I never learned, whose invitations I refused, whose interest I dismissed because I thought I had more important things to do. The truth is, there was nothing more important. Nothing. Every fence I mended, every cow I raised, every acre I acquired, all of it is meaningless without someone to share it with. This ranch that I worked 50 years to build is just land and animals and buildings. It's not a home. It's never been a home. A home has laughter echoing through the rooms. A home has arguments about whose turn it is to wash dishes. A home has little boots lined up by the door and toys scattered across the floor and photos covering every surface. A home has a reason to exist beyond being a place to sleep between work shifts. This house has none of that. This house is as dead as I'm going to be soon. I look around at everything I've built, and I see my father's influence in every corner. He taught me that men don't need softness, don't need love, don't need anything but work and land and money. He taught me to be hard, to be isolated, to measure my worth in assets and accounts. And I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. I became exactly what he wanted me to be, and it's the biggest mistake I could have made. My father died alone at 58, and I used to think he died successful. Now I understand he died as failures go, having built a ranch but destroyed any chance at happiness. And I'm following right in his footsteps, dying at 68, alone, just like him, having learned nothing from his mistake. People think I'm successful. They look at my 5,000 acres and my millions in the bank and they think I've made it. Young ranchers ask me for advice and I don't know what to tell them. Should I tell them the truth? Should I say that success measured in land and money is worthless if you're alone? Should I warn them that 50 years of 18-hour days will earn you a big ranch and an empty life? Should I tell them to work less and love more? To say yes to that dinner invitation? To make time for the barn dance? To choose connection over cattle? I don't tell them any of that. I give them advice about grazing rotations and breeding stock and profit margins because that's all I know. That's all I've ever known. And maybe they'll make the same mistakes I did, build the same empty empires, and die the same lonely deaths. Sometimes I drive past the Henderson place, which Tom's son took over after his father died. The ranch hasn't changed much, still the same operation it was when Tom was alive. But now there are bikes in the yard, and a swing set in the back, and trucks parked around the house on Sunday afternoons when the family gathers. I see Tom's grandkids running around, climbing trees, chasing the ranch dog, living the kind of childhood I never gave anyone a chance to have. And I understand what Tom built that I didn't. He built a life, not just a ranch. He built memories and connections and love. His legacy isn't just land that will eventually be sold or divided. His legacy is in those grandkids, in the memories they're making, in the way his son runs the ranch a little differently because of what Tom taught him, in the stories they tell about him at family dinners. That's what matters. That's what lasts. And I don't have any of it. There's a family cemetery plot on the north end of my property where my parents are buried, where their parents are buried, where I'll be buried soon. I go there sometimes and stand looking at the headstones and thinking about how it's going to end. There'll be 3 stones in a row: James Miller, Martha Miller, Robert Miller, 3 people who lived and died, and that'll be the end of our family line. Nobody will visit these graves. Nobody will bring flowers or remember anniversaries or tell their children about who we were. The grass will grow over us, and eventually the stones will sink into the earth and be forgotten, and it'll be like we never existed. 3 generations of hard work and sacrifice, and for what? So the land could be sold to some corporation that'll divide it up and strip it down and not care that my family poured their lives into this soil? I've thought about selling the ranch while I'm still alive, trying to find some family that would love it and care for it and fill it with the life it deserves. But who wants to buy 5,000 acres from a dying old man? And what would I do with the money? Take a cruise, travel the world, See all the places I never made time to visit? What's the point of seeing Paris or Rome or Tokyo alone at 68 with cancer? Experiences aren't experiences when you have nobody to share them with. You can't tell your stories to an empty room. You can't laugh about the funny things that happened when nobody was there to see them with you. Loneliness follows you wherever you go. It doesn't matter if you're in Paris or on your ranch in Texas. Alone is alone. Carlos knows I'm sick, though we don't talk about it. He's a good man, kind in a way I never learned to be. His wife sent me a casserole last week with a note saying she was praying for me. It made me cry, which seems to be something I do more often now. I never used to cry. Men don't cry, my father taught me. But I'm crying all the time now, because the dam finally broke and there's 50 years of unshed tears backed up behind it. I cry for my mother, who I never properly grieved. I cry for my father, who never learned how to be happy. I cry for every woman I turned away. I cry for the children I never had, and the grandchildren who will never exist. I cry for the life I could have lived if I'd made different choices. I cry because it's too late to fix any of it. Yesterday I found myself looking through old photo albums, something I haven't done in decades. There are pictures of my parents when they were young, before the ranch hardened my father and killed my mother. They look happy in some of the early photos, my mother laughing at something, my father with his arm around her waist, both of them young and full of hope. When did it change? When did my father decide that feelings were weakness and work was everything? Was it gradual or sudden? Did my mother try to fight it, or did she just accept it as her lot in life? I'll never know. They're both gone, and I never asked them the questions that matter. There are pictures of me as a child, a little boy with a gap-toothed smile riding a pony, playing with a puppy, helping my mother in her garden. That little boy had no idea what was coming. Had no idea he'd grow up to be a lonely old man with everything except what matters. If I could go back and talk to that little boy, what would I tell him? Would I tell him to be different from his father? Would I warn him about the trap he was walking into? Would he even listen? Or would he believe, like I did, that his father's way was the only way? There are no pictures of me as a young adult, no photos of graduations or parties or friends or girlfriends. My 20s and 30s and 40s are blank spots in the album because there was nothing to photograph. Just work, day after day, year after year. The last photo in the album is of me at 40, standing next to a prize bull at a cattle show, holding a blue ribbon, my face serious and proud. I look at that picture and feel sorry for that man. He thought he was winning. He thought that ribbon meant something. He didn't know he was losing everything that mattered by chasing things that didn't. The house feels bigger and emptier as I get sicker. I don't go upstairs much anymore. My knees can't take the stairs multiple times a day. So I've moved into the downstairs guest room. That means most of the house just sits unused. There's a whole second floor up there with 4 bedrooms that have never been slept in, that I always thought would someday be filled with children, and then grandchildren. One of them is still decorated the way my mother had it when I was a child, with the same curtains and quilt, like a museum to a life that ended 60 years ago. Another one I thought would be mine, and a wife's room someday, so I've kept it clean and ready, fresh sheets on the bed that have never been wrinkled by sleep, a closet that's empty on one side waiting for someone who will never come. It's pathetic, really. A 68-year-old man still keeping a spare side of the closet open just in case, still harboring some impossible fantasy that it's not too late, that maybe some miracle will happen and someone will love him after all. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. But it is too late. I know that. I'm dying. And even if I weren't, who would want a bitter old man who doesn't know how to talk about anything except cattle prices and land management? Who would want someone who's never learned how to be in a relationship, never learned how to compromise or communicate or care about someone else's needs? I've spent 68 years being alone, and I've calcified into it, become set in my ways, unable to bend or change or adapt. Even if by some miracle a woman appeared at my door tomorrow and said she wanted to be with me, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to be a partner, how to share my space, how to consider someone else in my decisions. I've built walls so high and so thick that nobody could climb them now even if they wanted to, and that's my own fault. I chose this. Every day for 50 years, I chose this. The ranch runs itself mostly thanks to Carlos and the systems I've put in place. I don't do much physical work anymore. My body won't allow it. I spend my days sitting on the porch watching other people work, which is its own kind of torture. I was never good at sitting still, but now I don't have a choice. I watch Carlos move cattle from one pasture to another and remember doing that myself. Remember the physical satisfaction of a hard day's work. Remember feeling like I was accomplishing something. Now, I just sit and watch and feel useless. Sometimes Carlos's kids come by after school, and I watch them play in the yard while their father finishes up work, and I feel a pain so sharp it's physical. That should have been my kids, my grandkids. This ranch should be full of young voices and laughter and life. Instead, it's just me dying slowly, watching other people's children enjoy the space I spent my life building for nobody. Last week, a real estate agent called asking if I'd considered selling. Someone had seen my spread from the highway and was interested in buying sight unseen. I told them no and hung up, but I've been thinking about that call. What happens when I die? Carlos can't afford to buy this place, and I can't give it to him without the tax burden destroying him. It'll go on the market, and some corporation or wealthy investor will buy it, probably tear down this house my grandfather built, probably turn it into luxury hunting leases or subdivide it for development. Everything my family built over generations will be erased, like we never existed. Maybe that's fitting. Maybe that's exactly what we deserve for prioritizing land over people, money over love, work over life. I've been having dreams lately, vivid ones that feel more real than my waking hours. In them I make different choices. In one dream, I say yes to Sarah Jenkins and go to that barn dance. We dance all night, and I make her laugh, and I ask her on a proper date. We get married a year later in the church in town, and she moves into this house and makes it a home. We have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and they grow up riding horses and working cattle and filling the house with noise and life. In the dream, I come in from working and find her in the kitchen making dinner, and I put my arms around her waist and kiss her neck, and she leans back into me and tells me about her day. In the dream, I'm not alone. In the dream, I'm happy. Then I wake up in my empty house at 4 in the morning, and the contrast is so painful I sometimes wish I could just stop waking up. In another dream, I take a different path entirely. I sell the ranch after my father dies and go to college. I study something impractical like English or history. I live in a dorm and make friends and go to parties and meet a girl in one of my classes. We study together and fall in love and get married after graduation. We get normal jobs and live in a normal house and have a normal life. We don't have much money, but we have enough. We have each other, and eventually we have kids, and we're happy in the way normal people are happy, with everyday joys and everyday struggles. In the dream, I don't have 5,000 acres or $15 million, but I have a wife who loves me and children who call me Dad, and a life that feels full instead of empty. Then I wake up and remember that I chose the 5,000 acres and the $15 million instead. And it feels like the worst trade in history. The cancer is progressing. I can feel it, a heaviness in my body, a tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, a vague pain that's getting less vague every day. The doctor wants me to start more aggressive treatment, but I don't see the point. Treatment might buy me another year, maybe 2, but for what? To sit alone in this house longer? To watch Carlos's kids grow up while mine never exist? To have more time to regret everything I've done wrong? No, thank you. I'd rather let nature take its course. At least it'll be over sooner. At least the pain will end. Carlos asked me yesterday if I had any family that should be notified about my illness. I told him no, no family, nobody to notify. He looked at me with pity, and I hated that. Hated being the object of pity. But I couldn't argue with him because he's right. I am pitiable. I'm a rich man dying alone, which might be the saddest thing there is. If I were poor and dying alone, at least I could blame circumstances, could say I never had a chance. But I had every chance. I had opportunities and offers and invitations, and I turned them all down. I have nobody to blame but myself, and that's a hard truth to die with. I've been thinking about my legacy, about what I'll leave behind. The ranch will be sold and forgotten. The money will go to charities that will spend it on whatever charities spend money on. My name might be on a hospital wing or a scholarship fund, but nobody will remember me personally. In 100 years, nobody will know Robert Miller existed. The earth will swallow my grave, and that'll be that. But here's what really haunts me. Even if I'd had children and grandchildren, even if this house had been full of family, I still wouldn't have known how to be a good father or grandfather. I would have treated them the way my father treated me, hard and cold and focused on work. I would have passed on the same toxic legacy, the same empty philosophy. Maybe it's better that the line ends with me. Maybe I'm doing the world a favor by not perpetuating this damage. But I don't really believe that. I think if I'd had a chance to be a father, if I'd chosen differently and met someone and started a family, the experience would have changed me. You can't hold a newborn baby and stay completely hard. You can't watch your child take their first steps and not feel something crack open inside you. You can't sit at a table full of family at Thanksgiving and not understand what you've been missing. Maybe fatherhood would have saved me from becoming my father. Maybe it would have taught me what my mother died before she could teach me, that love is what makes life worth living, that connection is what gives everything else meaning. But I'll never know. I made sure of that by choosing fence mending over barn dances, cattle sales over dinner dates, land acquisition over human connection. The regret doesn't come in waves anymore. It's constant, a background noise that never stops. I wake up with it, go to bed with it, carry it through every moment of every day. Sometimes it's so loud I can't think about anything else. I'll be sitting on the porch and suddenly I'm crying again, tears running down my weathered face, my body shaking with sobs, and I don't even know what specifically triggered it this time. Maybe it was seeing Carlos hug his daughter. Maybe it was a commercial on TV showing a family vacation. Maybe it was just the weight of 68 years of mistakes finally crushing me completely. Carlos found me crying last week and asked if I was in pain. I told him yes, I was in pain, but it wasn't the kind a doctor could fix. He sat with me for a while, didn't say anything, just sat there keeping me company, and it was maybe the kindest thing anyone's done for me in decades. I tried to pray the other night, something I haven't really done since I was a child. I got down on my knees beside my bed, which hurt like hell with my arthritis, and I tried to talk to God. I didn't know what to say. What do you say when you've wasted your whole life? I'm sorry. Please help. Give me another chance. All of those felt inadequate and too late. I ended up just kneeling there in silence, tears dripping onto the floor, my knees screaming in pain, until I finally gave up and climbed back into bed. If God's out there, He's probably as disappointed in me as I am in myself. I had one life to live, one chance to get it right, and I blew it spectacularly. Sometimes I try to imagine what my life would be like right now if I'd made different choices. It's a form of torture, but I can't help myself. If I'd married Sarah Jenkins, we'd be sitting together right now, maybe watching TV or reading, comfortable in each other's company after 40 years together. We'd talk about our kids, about what they're doing with their lives, about when the grandkids are coming to visit. We'd make plans for the holidays, argue gently about whether to serve ham or turkey, laugh about the time our son fell off his horse at the county fair. We'd go to bed together and I'd fall asleep with her next to me, warm and real, and I'd wake up in the morning to her face, and I'd know that I'd lived my life right. Instead, I sit alone, watch TV alone, go to bed alone, wake up alone. The other side of the bed has never been slept on. The other side of the closet has never held anyone's clothes. The other chair at the table has never had anyone sitting in it. My life is a monument to absence, to all the things that could have been but aren't. I wonder sometimes what the women I turned away are doing now. Is Sarah Jenkins happy? Did she have a good life with the man from Austin she married? Did Margaret Sullivan find someone who appreciated her kindness? Are they grandmothers now? Their houses full of family photos, their hearts full of memories? I hope so. I hope my rejection didn't hurt them too badly. Hope they found men who were better than me. Men who knew how to love and be loved. Men who didn't waste their lives building empires for nobody. They deserved better than what I would have given them anyway. Even if I'd said yes, I probably would have made them miserable with my emotional unavailability, my obsession with work, my inability to express or even feel anything beyond determination and exhaustion. Maybe it's good that I spared them that. Maybe my one good deed in life was staying alone and not inflicting my damage on anyone else. But God, I wish I'd tried. I wish I'd been brave enough to be vulnerable, to risk getting hurt, to open myself up to another person. I wish I'd understood that the scariest thing in life isn't rejection or failure. It's getting to the end and realizing you never really lived at all. Success is easy in a way. You just work hard and make good decisions, and eventually you accumulate wealth and property and status. But happiness, real happiness, that's harder. That requires letting people in. That requires caring about something more than profit margins. That requires being willing to choose poorly from a financial standpoint in order to choose well from a human standpoint. That requires courage I didn't have. My father screwed me up. There's no denying that. His model of masculinity, his worship of work, his emotional constipation, all of it damaged me in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. But I can't blame him entirely. I'm 68 years old. I've been an adult for 50 years. At some point it became my responsibility to heal, to grow, to be different from what I was taught. And I didn't. I just perpetuated the same patterns, made the same mistakes, lived the same empty life. I could have gone to therapy. I could have read books about emotional intelligence. I could have forced myself to be social even when it was uncomfortable. I could have tried harder to connect, to change, to become someone capable of love. But I didn't. I just kept doing what I'd always done, hoping that somehow it would eventually feel like enough. It never did. The physical pain from the cancer is getting worse. I'm on morphine now, which makes everything fuzzy and strange. Sometimes I'm not sure what's real and what's dream. Yesterday I thought I saw my mother in the kitchen, young and beautiful like she was in the old photos, humming while she made breakfast. I called out to her and she turned and smiled at me, and for a moment I was 7 years old again and she was alive and everything was okay. Then I blinked and she was gone, and it was just empty kitchen, and the grief hit me all over again. I don't know if I'm looking forward to dying or dreading it. Part of me wants it to be over, wants to stop hurting both physically and emotionally. But part of me is terrified. What if there's nothing after this? What if I die and just cease to exist and all of this suffering and regret doesn't even lead to some kind of understanding or peace or resolution? What if I die alone in this bed and nobody finds me for days? And that's the end of the story? Carlos has been staying later. I think he's worried about leaving me alone. His wife packs extra food and sends it for me. Mexican dishes that smell amazing and taste better than anything I've cooked for myself in 50 years. I eat them slowly, savoring every bite, and I think about the love that went into making them, about a woman who doesn't really know me but cares enough to feed me anyway. That's what I've been missing all these years, that casual everyday love, the kind that shows up in home-cooked meals and worried phone calls and someone asking how you're feeling. I've had business relationships and professional respect, but never that simple human caring. It's a terrible thing to discover what you needed only after it's too late to get it. Last night I did something I haven't done in years. I went through my father's old papers looking for something, though I wasn't sure what, and I found it buried in a box in the back of the closet. Love letters. Letters from my mother to my father, written before they were married, full of affection and hope and tenderness. And letters from my father to my mother, and these shocked me because they were gentle, romantic, full of feeling. This hard, cold man I knew had once written poetry to the woman he loved. He'd once expressed emotion. He'd once been capable of softness. What happened? When did he decide to kill that part of himself? Why did he teach me to kill it in myself too? I'll never know, but it breaks my heart that he had love and threw it away, that he had my mother's devotion and met it with coldness, that he chose to be miserable when he could have been happy. And it breaks my heart that I followed his example so faithfully. I've been trying to write letters of my own, to the people I've wronged or neglected over the years. To Sarah Jenkins, apologizing for rejecting her and wasting what could have been. To Margaret Sullivan, telling her I was an idiot and I hope she had a wonderful life. To my mother, telling her I'm sorry I became like my father instead of like her. To my father, telling him I understand now how badly he screwed up and how much damage he caused. but I can't finish any of them. What's the point? These people have moved on with their lives. They don't need letters from a dying old man they barely remember. And what would I say anyway? Sorry I chose cattle over human connection. Sorry I wasted my life. Sorry I didn't figure any of this out until it was too late to matter. Some apologies can't be made because the damage is done and time has moved on. The hospice nurse started coming this week. Her name is Patricia, and she's probably in her 50s, kind and competent and matter-of-fact about death in a way I find simultaneously comforting and disturbing. She checks my vitals and adjusts my medications and asks about my pain levels, and she does it all with this professional compassion that makes me feel both cared for and pitied. She asked me yesterday if I had any family she should contact, and when I said no, she got this look on her face, this sad knowing look, and I could tell she's seen this before. Lonely old people dying alone, leaving everything to charity, ending their lives the way they lived them. I'm not special, I'm just another cautionary tale, another example of what happens when you prioritize things over people. I asked Patricia yesterday how long I had. She said it was hard to tell, maybe a few months, maybe less. The cancer is spreading faster than they expected. My body is shutting down piece by piece. I should be scared, I suppose, but mostly I'm just tired. I'm tired of hurting, tired of being alone, tired of regretting. Death feels less like an ending and more like a relief, a stop to all this suffering. Maybe that's the morphine talking. Or maybe I've just been dead inside for so long that my body finally catching up doesn't feel like that big a change. I spent this morning looking at the ranch from my porch, really looking at it, trying to see it as something other than work and investment. And you know what? It's beautiful. The rolling hills, the pastures green from recent rain, the cattle grazing peacefully, the old oak trees my grandfather planted, the barn my father built, the fences I've mended 10,000 times. It's a beautiful piece of land, and I've spent 50 years here without ever really appreciating it. I've seen it as property, as assets, as work to be done. I never just sat and enjoyed it. I never brought a woman here and showed her the sunset over the west pasture. I never taught a son to ride horses in the north field. I never built a treehouse in the old oak for grandchildren to play in. This beautiful land has been wasted on me, like pearls before swine. It deserved a family that would love it and live on it and make memories here. Instead it got me, a workaholic hermit who saw it as nothing but dirt and grass and income. If I could give advice to my younger self, if I could go back to that angry, grieving 20-year-old who inherited this ranch and thought work was everything, what would I say? I'd tell him to sell it. I'd tell him to take the money and go to college and have a normal life. I'd tell him that there's no honor in sacrifice if you're sacrificing your chance at happiness. I'd tell him that his father was wrong about everything that matters. I'd tell him to say yes to the barn dance, to go on that date, to take a chance on love, even though it's scary. I'd tell him that 50 years from now he'll be dying alone, wishing he'd made different choices, and that no amount of money or land will comfort him in his final days. But would he listen? Probably not. 20-year-olds never do, especially not stubborn, angry ones who think they have everything figured out. Maybe that's why we all have to learn these lessons for ourselves, why every generation makes the same mistakes until we're old and it's too late to fix them. Carlos brought his family to visit yesterday evening, which I think was Patricia's suggestion. His wife Maria made a special dinner, and they all sat around my kitchen table, that table that's been empty for so long, and it was full of noise and life and laughter. Their youngest daughter, Anna, who's maybe 6 years old, climbed into my lap and showed me a drawing she'd made at school. It was of a horse, she said, like the ones on my ranch. I held her little warm body and looked at her drawing and felt something break inside me. This is what I should have had. This is what life is supposed to be. Not the silence and emptiness, but this chaos and joy and connection. When they left, Anna gave me a hug and said, "I hope you feel better, Mr. Miller." I cried after they drove away. Deep, racking sobs that hurt my chest and my back and everything else. Carlos's family was kind to visit, but it just showed me everything I don't have, everything I'll never have. I'll die without ever holding my own child, without ever being hugged by my own grandchild, without ever having anyone call me dad or papa or grandpa. That drawing Anna made is taped to my refrigerator now. the only child's artwork that will ever be displayed in this house. The morphine dreams are getting stranger. Last night I dreamed I was young again, 20 years old, standing at a crossroads. One road led to the ranch, to work and isolation and eventual wealth. The other road led to town, to college and relationships and a normal life. In the dream, I could see both futures clearly. In one, I ended up exactly where I am now, rich and alone and full of regret. In the other, I ended up ordinary but happy, with a wife and kids and a small house, and not much money but enough love to make it all worthwhile. In the dream, I chose the second path. I walked away from the ranch and toward the life I should have lived. I woke up this morning crying because even my dreams are mocking me now, showing me what could have been, rubbing my face in my mistakes. I've started giving things away, not the ranch or the major assets, but smaller things. I gave Carlos my father's favorite saddle, the one he rode for 30 years. I gave Maria my mother's recipe box full of handwritten recipes I'll never make. I gave their kids some of my old books, the ones from childhood that I've kept all these years for no reason. It feels good to see these things go to people who'll use them, who'll appreciate them, who'll give them a life they never had with me. When I die, there won't be much personal stuff left. No family heirlooms to pass down, no treasured possessions that mean anything to anyone. Just furniture and ranch equipment and bank accounts, all of it soulless and cold. Patricia asked me yesterday if I'd made peace with my death. I told her I hadn't made peace with my life yet, so death seemed premature. She smiled sadly and said it's never too late to make peace. But I think she's wrong. Some things you can't fix. Some mistakes are permanent. I can't unlive the last 50 years. I can't go back and make different choices. I can't suddenly produce a family out of thin air. The best I can do is accept that I failed at the most important parts of being human, that I let fear and stubbornness and bad role models turn me into something barely alive, and that soon I'll be completely dead and it won't matter anymore. The pain is pretty constant now, even with the morphine. Not just the cancer pain, but the arthritis and the old injuries and the general decay of a body that's worked too hard for too long. I'm falling apart piece by piece, systems shutting down, and I'm watching it happen with this strange detachment. This body that I've used like a tool for 68 years, never caring for it properly, never giving it rest, just pushing it to work harder and longer, it's finally giving up. I don't blame it. I'd give up on me too if I could. I got a call yesterday from the hospital I'm leaving most of my money to. They wanted to discuss the donation, talk about the naming opportunities, get photos for their publicity materials. I told them to name the wing whatever they want. I don't care. They seemed disappointed that I wasn't more interested in the legacy aspect. But what legacy? A building with my name on it that nobody will remember in 50 years. That's not a legacy. That's just a tax write-off. A real legacy is in the people you leave behind, in the memories you create, in the love you give and receive. I don't have any of that. All I have is money, and money is the most meaningless legacy there is. Carlos told me yesterday that his oldest son asked if he could buy the ranch when I'm gone, said he'd been saving money and could maybe get a loan for the rest. I told him the ranch is worth way more than his son could ever afford, probably 15 or 20 million with the land and livestock and equipment. Carlos looked crushed, and I felt terrible. Here's this young man, maybe 25 years old, with dreams of owning his own place, and I'm sitting here dying with more money than I could ever spend and no one to leave it to. It's absurd. It's obscene. So I should just give him the ranch, let him have it. Let a family that will actually love it and live on it take over. But there are tax implications and legal complications, and the charities are already counting on that money, and I don't have the energy to figure it all out. So I'll die, and some corporation will buy it, and Carlos's son's dream will die too, and the whole thing is just another example of how broken everything is. I can barely get out of bed anymore. Patricia is here most days now, helping me with basic things that have become impossible. Eating is hard, my appetite is gone, and everything tastes like ashes. Sleeping is hard, the pain breaks through the morphine and wakes me up gasping. Living is hard, not that I've been particularly good at it even when I was healthy. I spend most of my time now in that fuzzy morphine space between awake and asleep, between memory and dream, between past regrets and present pain. Time feels meaningless. Days blend together. I know it's getting close to the end because Patricia has that look that medical people get when they're preparing for someone to die, that gentle professional sadness that means it could be any day now. Sometimes I imagine what would happen if I survived this, if by some miracle the cancer went into remission and I got a few more years. What would I do differently? The honest answer is probably nothing. I'm too old and set in my ways and damaged to change now. I'd probably just keep sitting on this porch alone, regretting until I died of something else. Some people talk about near-death experiences changing them, giving them a new lease on life, making them appreciate every moment. But I think that only works if you have something to appreciate, someone to appreciate it with. What would I do with a few more years? Work less and sit around more? Be alone in a different room? Count my money more slowly? There's nothing for me to come back to. Maybe that's why I'm not fighting harder. Maybe that's why I'm ready to let go. I wrote a letter to Carlos and Maria yesterday, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I thanked them for their kindness, for treating me like I mattered when I'd done nothing to deserve it. I told them I was sorry their son couldn't have the ranch, but I was leaving them some money in my will, not enough to buy the place but enough to help with their kids' college or whatever they needed. I told them they were good people, and they were raising good kids, and they represented everything I should have been but wasn't. I don't know if I'll give them the letter or if I'll die with it in my drawer, but I needed to write it anyway. Needed to tell someone that I noticed their kindness, that it mattered, that they made my last days slightly less awful than they would have been otherwise. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moments when I could have changed course. There were dozens of them, hundreds maybe, moments when I could have chosen differently. The barn dance, the dinner invitation, the casserole from the widow, every time a neighbor invited me to a barbecue, every Sunday I skipped church, every time I worked through a holiday, every time I said the ranch needed me more than I needed anything else. Each one of those moments was a choice, and I chose wrong every single time. Not because I didn't know better, but because I was scared. I was scared of being vulnerable, scared of caring about something I could lose, scared of being rejected, scared of being hurt. So I chose loneliness because loneliness was safe. And now I'm dying alone, and loneliness doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels like punishment. It feels like exactly what I deserve. If there's an afterlife, if I see my parents again, what will I say to them? Will I tell my mother I'm sorry I didn't honor her memory by building the loving family she wanted for me? Will I tell my father I'm angry that he taught me all the wrong lessons, and I was too stupid to figure that out until it was too late? Will they be disappointed in me? Will they even care? Maybe death is just nothing, just an end to consciousness, no reunion or reckoning or resolution. Maybe I'll just stop existing and that'll be that. Part of me hopes so. Part of me can't bear the thought of having to explain to my mother why her son died a virgin at 68, why he turned down every chance at love, why he chose to live like he did. How do you explain that to someone who loved you? How do you justify wasting the life they gave you? The hospice nurse says it could be days now. My vitals are declining, my body is shutting down. All the clinical markers point to death approaching. I should be scared, but I'm just tired. So tired. Tired of hurting, tired of regretting, tired of being alone. Death feels like sleep, like finally getting to rest after 68 years of running on a treadmill that went nowhere. I don't believe in heaven or hell, but if they exist, I'm probably not going to the good place. I haven't been evil, haven't hurt anyone deliberately, but I've wasted the gift of life, and that seems like its own kind of sin. I was given everything, health and land and opportunity, and I squandered it all chasing the wrong things. If there's a God judging me, that judgment will be harsh, and I won't be able to argue with it. Carlos is here now, sitting in the chair next to my bed, keeping vigil, even though I'm barely conscious most of the time. I can hear him praying quietly in Spanish, his voice a gentle murmur in the background. It's kind of him to be here. Nobody should die alone, even someone like me who chose solitude at every turn. Maria was here earlier. She held my hand and told me it was okay to let go, that I didn't have to fight anymore. How does she know that's what I needed to hear? How do people develop that instinct for what others need? I never learned it. I never learned how to comfort or be comforted, how to connect or be connected, how to love or be loved. I learned how to work and accumulate and endure, and those turned out to be the least important skills of all. I'm drifting now, in and out, pain and memory and morphine dreams all blending together. I see my mother young and beautiful. I see my father reading those love letters. I see Sarah Jenkins with her red hair. I see Margaret Sullivan's gentle smile. I see all the lives I could have lived, all the choices I could have made, all the people I could have been. In my final moments, I'm surrounded by ghosts of possibilities, by the family I never had, by the love I never accepted, by the life I never lived. The ranch outside is silent and empty, 5,000 acres of beautiful land that I built into an empire and a prison. The house around me is silent and empty, rooms that were never filled with laughter or arguments or life. And I'm silent and empty, a shell of a person who mistook work for purpose and solitude for strength. If I could do it over, I'd choose differently. I'd say yes to the barn dance, I'd go on the date, I'd let people in, I'd prioritize love over land, connection over cattle, life over work. I'd risk getting hurt because getting hurt would mean I felt something, would mean I mattered to someone, would mean I was alive in all the ways that count. I'd accept that success measured in dollars is meaningless if you're counting those dollars alone. I'd understand that the scariest thing isn't vulnerability or rejection or loss, it's getting to the end and realizing you never really lived at all. But I can't do it over. This is it. This is the life I built with my choices. And in a few hours or days, it'll be over, and I'll die exactly as I lived. Alone, wealthy, and empty. That's my legacy. That's my story. That's the price I paid for 50 years of choosing wrong. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. And now the darkness is coming, and I'm not fighting it anymore. I'm letting go, sinking into it, accepting the end I earned through a lifetime of fear and stubbornness and choosing things over people. My last thought, as consciousness slips away, is a simple one. I had 5,000 acres, millions of dollars, and a lifetime of work to show for my time on Earth. But I never had what mattered. I never had love. And now it's too late, forever too late, and that's the saddest ending there is.